Mosaic, a daily news program from Worldlink TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
This is the news in brief. Welcome. In Grozny, 6 policemen were killed and others were wounded in a suicide operation conducted by a man and a woman who exploded a cargo truck near a government building. Powell meets with the Palestinian Prime Minister to discuss the transfer of security responsibilities in parts of Gaza and Bethlehem without waiting for armed groups to agree to a ceasefire with Israel. Sharon, during his meeting with Powell in Jerusalem, reiterates that Israel will continue to focus on its first priorities, demanding Abu Mazen's government to destroy, as he called it, the weapons of Palestinian terrorist organizations and to dismantle its foundations as a condition of continuing the peace process. From Jerusalem, our correspondent, Leila Auda.
The U.S. Secretary of State Colin Powell ended his visit to Israel and Palestine. He conveyed serious and decisive American demands on Abu Mazen's government on the need to fight what he described terrorist organizations, with the Hamas movement on top of the list. It was clearly understood that the U.S. is demanding the security of Israel.
The Qassam brigades claimed responsibility for firing on an Israeli car near Ramallah, killing 1 Israeli settler and wounding 3 others, 2 of whom are Americans. The draft European Constitution becomes a significant and essential document after the former French president passed out copies to the group of 25 countries meeting in Porto Carras. This is the end of the news in brief. Welcome to the news from Abu Dhabi Television. The U.S. Secretary of State Colin Powell held a joint press conference in Jericho with Palestinian Prime Minister Mahmoud Abbas Abu Mazen, urging him to assume the security responsibilities north of the Gaza Strip and Bethlehem without waiting for the armed Palestinian groups to agree to a ceasefire with Israel. Meanwhile, Mahmoud Abbas reiterated that Israel must turn itself into a partner in order for the peace efforts to succeed, urging them to change their policies and hinting that Israel is responsible for hindering security efforts in Gaza.
The issue of security was the main topic of discussion in the meeting between Palestinian Prime Minister Mahmoud Abbas and the U.S. Secretary of State, Colin Powell, in Jericho. The issues regarding Israel's withdrawal from the north of the Gaza Strip and Bethlehem, in addition to Abu Mazen's efforts in reaching a truce with the opposition factions, were also discussed.
Powell says that a group of American observers is a guarantee. He said that we consider this a guarantee. Thus, the American guarantees will be reflected in their observation agencies or the observation committee. But I do not want to confirm what is not certain.
The U.S. Secretary of State held 2 meetings with the Palestinian side. One of them was closed, and the other, an open meeting, focusing on the topic of terrorism, as he defined it. In his joint press conference with Abu Mazen, he openly attacked Hamas.
Hamas is committed to terror.
Hamas is committed to terror, and we cannot divide Hamas into 2 parts. Therefore, we believe that the international community must fight Hamas activities with all force.
The Palestinian Prime Minister tried to get a sense of the political horizon from the U.S. diplomatic official, discussing the steps his government is taking in order to reach a truce with the opposition factions, adding that the international community and the American administration have a responsibility to urge Israel to take real steps on the ground and end the Israeli aggression while withdrawing from Gaza and Bethlehem.
Israel's actions reflect unwillingness of taking a step forward. We asked Israel to withdraw entirely from the Gaza Strip and the city of Bethlehem as a first step to help us achieve our responsibilities. We hope that Israel will not continue to hinder this step.
On his second trip in less than 2 months, Powell commended Abu Mazen. However, he clearly adopted the Israeli position regarding security and what he described as terrorism. Powell's visit was a relief to the Israelis, especially since he adopted their position. However, this visit does not bring hope to the Palestinians, since they see that it will greatly affect the peace process. Mazen Ahmed Saeed, Abu Dhabi TV, Jericho.
The Palestinian Foreign Minister Nabil Shaath said that Hamas may accept a ceasefire agreement. Shaath made his announcement after meeting with European Union foreign ministers in Luxembourg.
The Palestinian Foreign Minister, Nabil Shaath, said that a series of ceasefire negotiations are taking place between Hamas and the Palestinian Authority in coordination with the Egyptians. However, he refused to disclose the details of the negotiations, arguing that there is no need to put Hamas on the European list of terrorist organizations, especially if Hamas commits itself to a ceasefire. Shaath is anticipating that Hamas will agree to a total ceasefire, hoping that the Palestinian government would receive an answer from Hamas soon. A number of European countries have called for including the Hamas movement on the list of terrorist organizations. However, a number of member countries said that such a step will complicate the situation in the Middle East. Meanwhile, Shaath supported the French Foreign Minister's proposal of placing what he called peacekeeping forces. Shaath added that the Palestinians totally support such a step because it is very important to bring peace back to the region.
At night, Jewish extremists rebuilt some of the settlements that were dismantled by the Israeli government. Meanwhile, a number of Israelis from Mitzov settlement began building a settlement near a location where 2 Israeli women were injured. By ignoring this issue, the Israeli government violates the commitments it made in Sharm el-Sheikh and Al-Aqaba summits. The Israeli Peace Now movement announced that 5 new settlements were being built in the West Bank. This coincides with a decision to postpone dismantling 3 of these settlements. According to a spokesman from Peace Now, 4 new settlements that are built now were not there 1 week ago. These settlements start by stationing caravans on hills near the settlements of Kahaf Sher, Rahilim, Ofara, and Ilon Morah.
Former Israeli Prime Minister and Labour Party leader Shimon Peres has been elected the temporary Labour Party's chairman for the 3rd time. Peres took 49.2% of the ballot conducted by the party's Central Committee, easily beating 2 much younger rivals with 28 and 22%. He will serve as Labour's interim leader until June 15, 2004, when it will vote for a permanent chairman as its candidate for Prime Minister in the next general elections due in 2007. Peres held the office in 1984-86 under a rotating leadership as part of a national unity coalition, and later headed a caretaker government after the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin in 1995, but he has failed in 5 election runs for Prime Minister. Israeli occupation forces are continuing their aggressive actions against Palestinians. Israeli occupation army and settlers are jointly besieging many Palestinian areas while carrying out raids on houses and firing gunshots at residents, causing terror and destruction. This report has more.
The Palestinian West Bank town of Deir Abu Mishaal near Ramallah remains an example for steadfastness and resistance against the agriculture and construction expansion of Israeli settlers. This fact is confirmed by 3,500 people living in the town that became, since the early days of occupation, a target for occupiers and a center for resistance. The town dedicated many martyrs and wounded and detainees for challenging occupation policies. Until this day, citizens assure that occupation forces are storming into their houses on a daily basis, stealing their money, destroying their belongings, and blowing up parts of their houses and water wells. Moreover, agricultural areas in the town are subject to confiscation and burning olive trees under the pretext that they cover Palestinian resistance fighters while firing towards the roads of a nearby Israeli settlement.
The army came along with settlers. They brought electric saws with them and they've cut fig and olive trees. We went to them, but the army banned us.
Israeli aggressive acts in the village extended to reach the town school, which Israeli intelligence transformed into rooms of interrogation.
The number has exceeded 200 men, and Israelis said this is just a routine interrogation procedure taken during the curfew. The detention usually lasts from 6 o'clock in the morning till 6 in the afternoon.
But despite these procedures, Palestinian citizens in the town of Deir Abu Mishaal are still holding on to their rights and to resisting any attempt to confiscate what remain of their properties, taking as a model a woman from their town who was martyred as she was defending her land.
U.S. occupation forces in Iraq have come under 3 attacks in less than 24 hours, despite a fierce U.S. crackdown to root out Iraqi resistance. The attacks left 1 soldier dead and several others injured, raising the number of U.S. deaths to more than 52 in a period of 51 days. Meanwhile, U.S. soldiers in Iraq told a British newspaper how they shot Iraqi civilians and killed the wounded and left some of them to bleed to death in the battlefield.
Despite a fierce U.S. crackdown to root out Iraqi resistance, a U.S. occupation soldier was killed Thursday and several others were wounded in southern Baghdad in what appears to be the latest challenge to U.S. forces' efforts to crush the resistance. It was the 3rd fatal attack on U.S. forces in and around the capital in 24 hours, following a sniper attack Monday and a drive-by shooting Wednesday. Several other soldiers were wounded in twin attacks in the strained city of Fallujah west of Baghdad, which caused a major power cut in the region. In a separate incident in West Baghdad on Thursday, an army truck was hit by an RPG, tearing it apart and burning it, although U.S. military police at the scene said the vehicle had earlier broken down and was set on fire after it was left alone. Witnesses in the area said there were casualties and helicopters were seen evacuating them. These latest attacks came amid flaring anger in Baghdad over the slow return of basic public services, with former Iraqi soldiers warning they are ready to take up arms against the city's U.S. occupiers if a pay dispute is not settled by next Monday. On the other hand, U.S. occupation troops told their stories about shooting Iraqis and killing the wounded and leaving others to bleed to death. Soldiers were speaking to the London-based Evening Standard newspaper on Thursday. There was no problem when it came to shooting people who were not in uniform. I just pulled the trigger. If they were there, they were enemy, whether in uniform or not. With these words, 22-year-old Special Corporal Michael Richardson expressed the nature of his job in Iraq. Richardson continued saying occupation soldiers did not want any Iraqi prisoner of war. He said, "You do not want them to live." Other soldiers spoke of how they took the lives of many Iraqi civilians, including women and children, in their cars because they were afraid that they might be attacked. 34-year-old U.S. Army Sergeant John Meadows told the newspaper that there is no way of forgetting all the people the U.S. soldiers had killed, adding that they've already seen psychiatrists and the chain of command has got letters back saying these men need to be taken out of this situation, but nothing happened. Perhaps Iraqis are meant to live under the occupation of mentally disturbed U.S. killer soldiers who claim to have invaded Iraq to oust a tyrant ruler and to end a disturbed regime.
U.S. Administrator of occupied Iraq Paul Bremer held a new meeting with leaders of Iraqi political factions to discuss the formation of an Iraqi interim government according to the demands of these factions. An Iraqi source told Al-Manar channel that the dialogue dealt with demands for a fast formation of the government that would respond to the urgent needs of Iraqis, such as the Constitutional Council and the Iraqi army issue, as well as other suspended economic matters, particularly the Iraqi currency. And United Nations envoy Sergio Vieira de Mello on Thursday met Kurdish leaders in the northern Iraqi city of Erbil as he continued his mission to try to get to grips with the requirements needed for developing an Iraqi political process. At Thursday's meeting, he discussed political issues with Kurdish leader Masoud Barzani, who later indicated that he had an open mind as far as new political developments are concerned. De Mello told reporters there was agreement on the the need to move swiftly to new transitional institutions that will embody Iraqi sovereignty. The UN envoy has also underlined the importance of promoting and protecting the human rights of all Iraqis and of assuring an equal place for Iraqi women in all walks of life. Iran considered the findings of the International Atomic Energy Agency's 35-nation Board of Governors a defeat for the United States, which wanted to obtain a resolution condemning the Islamic Republic. And Tehran reiterated its policy is not to produce nuclear arms, while indicating it is ready to cooperate with the international community, calling for stricter inspections of its nuclear sites if they honor commitments towards Iran. Washington again accused Iran of having a covert nuclear weapons program, but admitted that information on the alleged program was not detailed. The International Atomic Energy Agency's statement clearly did not match U.S. aspirations for the IAEA to add to the pressure building against Iran by issuing a resounding condemnation of its nuclear program. Accusing Iran of having a secret nuclear arms program, the United States had wanted the nuclear agency to declare Tehran in violation of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. The matter could then be sent to the UN Security Council for possible action. But objections from Iran and non-aligned countries countered U.S. pressure, and IAEA Chief Mohammed al-Baradei emerged from the agency's headquarters in Vienna on Thursday, saying the 35-nation board had reached consensus on the statement after days of demanding negotiations. Al-Baradei said the IAEA had reached a broad sense that made it clear that Iran should accept a new protocol for inspections without any conditions of the Islamic Republic's nuclear facilities. He added the board also made it clear that Iran should continue to be fully transparent, fully cooperative with the agency in completing the work ahead. Nuclear plants in Iran being built with Russian cooperation has been under constant IAEA inspection since Iran signed the Non-Proliferation Treaty. The head of Iran's Atomic Energy Agency, Ghulam Reza Aghazadeh, reiterated the policy of the Islamic Republic is not to produce nuclear arms and said in the same manner they insist we sign the additional protocol, we insist the IAEA honor its commitments to our country. It is the right of a country which has signed numerous agreements to expect they also make a gesture, alluding to the country's wish for international assistance in the building of its nuclear power plants. Aghazadeh nevertheless added his country has a positive outlook to the issue, while hailing the results of the IAEA as a defeat for the United States. Meanwhile, U.S. Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld on Thursday reiterated the U.S. accusations and speculated that Iran would be able to produce a small number of nuclear weapons in the period during this decade. However, he admitted that information on the alleged program was not detailed. For his part, Russian President Vladimir Putin said Friday that the Iranian president had once again confirmed that Iran had no plans to develop nuclear weapons.
One Israeli has been killed and 3 wounded after Palestinian gunmen shot at their car in the West Bank. The gunmen opened fire on the car, causing it to overturn. It was not immediately clear if the passengers were actually hit by gunshots. The shooting occurred on a road used by Jewish settlers near the Palestinian city of Ramallah. Hamas claimed responsibility for the attack. Tension remains high in Iraq, with more attacks on U.S. forces and calls for an end of occupation. Attackers had 2 U.S. military vehicles with grenades, setting them ablaze in the west of Iraqi town of Fallujah. Witnesses said the U.S. vehicles came under grenade attack from assailants in a car that drove by. They said the troops fired back indiscriminately, hitting houses and cars and wounding a woman. U.S. forces have tightened measures against Iraqis going on night patrol to enforce a curfew. They arrested several Iraqis in Baghdad suburb and searched cars, including one that was carrying an injured woman who was hit by a bullet while sitting in her garden. Resentment of U.S. occupation was on the rise, with a leading cleric attacking U.S. and Britain. Addressing worshippers at a vast mosque in central Baghdad during Friday prayers, the cleric said what the U.S. called liberation had actually turned out to be an occupation of Iraq. U.S. Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld has said Iran is likely engaged in a secret nuclear weapons program, but added that he did not believe Iran was currently in possession of any nuclear weapons, but suggested they could within the decade.
Knowledgeable people who spend their lives thinking about these things have concluded that that is in fact what they're doing. We know they have invested a good deal of time and money in ballistic missile technologies, and so certainly they are on a path of having the ability to deliver such weapons if in fact they're able to develop them. I don't know of anyone who assesses that they currently have nuclear weapons.
Iran's foreign ministry spokesman Hamid Reza Safi says the recent remarks by the head of International Atomic Energy Agency, Mohammad al-Baradi, is not an official statement issued by the Board of Governors of the International Atomic Energy Agency. Rather, it is his conclusion of debates made at a recent meeting of the 35-nation board in Vienna. Refreshing Tehran's abiding by its commitments to the IAEA, the Iranian senior diplomat asserted Tehran secures it as a natural right to use nuclear energy only for peaceful purposes. The Iranian foreign ministry spokesman went on to say Tehran expects the IAEA as a technical and specialized organization to carry out its professional duties and not to be influenced by political pressures. Russian President Vladimir Putin said Friday that Iran had just assured him Tehran has no plans to develop nuclear weapons. Saying this in an annual Kremlin news conference, he said that U.S. President George W. Bush had made Iran the focus of their recent meetings at the 300th anniversary festivities in St. Petersburg. He gave no hint that Moscow planned to halt construction of Iran's first nuclear power plant in Bushehr, southern Iran. The International Atomic Energy Agency IAEA inspectors' demand on taking environmental samples from certain spots in Iran runs against the agreement signed by Tehran. Iran's Atomic Energy Organization chief Gholam Reza Aghazadeh, announcing this, also said the debated sites do not hold nuclear establishments and thereby, as he added, are not included in the environmental inspection to be led by the IAEA. Aghazadeh went on to say Tehran, however, is not generally opposed to the inspection, but since the action is not stated in the related deals and that there is no end to calls of such nature, Iran cannot allow the inspection to start. French police have arrested another 75 advocates of the MKO terrorist group in Paris. According to the city's police department, a number of the detainees had been on board vehicles marching to the French capital to stage rallies in protest to the massive roundup of the MKO members by the French police. The seizure comes upon a ban by the French police on pro-MKO rallies.
Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, which promotes journalism excellence worldwide and invests in the vitality of 26 U.S. communities, and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation,